After 3 months or more than 3 months preparing the crash car that we are sending to the test facility, it's really hard to see how the car is slowly being destroyed, hammer it, over-torquing it, and then finally crashing it against the wall.
In the hypercar world, perfection is assumed until it isn't. On a summer morning in Greece, a Koenigsegg Jesko Nür Edition, one of only a handful ever built, erupted into flames during a supercar rally. The fire was so intense it erased nearly every trace of the car in minutes, leaving behind only questions. What failed inside a machine engineered at the absolute edge of performance? And why did Koenigsegg respond in a way no other manufacturer would dare? Issuing a global do-not-drive order and personally stepping in to rebuild. The lost car? Behind the smoke lies a story about extreme engineering, microscopic failure points, and a company that refused to follow the industry playbook. The answers are more extraordinary than the fire itself. The Koenigsegg difference. To understand what was lost in that fire, it is necessary to understand what a Koenigsegg actually is. Not in the marketing language of the supercar world, not in the specifications that read like a list of numbers designed to silence any room, but in the specific and unusual reality of how these machines come to exist in the first place. Most automotive manufacturers measure their ambition in production volume. Koenigsegg measures it in the opposite direction. The factory in Ängelholm, Sweden, a converted military airbase where Swedish fighter jets once rolled across the same floor.
The Gripen, Swedish for Griffin, is a fourth-generation light, single-engine supersonic fighter jet. It's a so-called multi-role fighter aircraft
that now holds carbon fiber tubs in various stages of careful assembly, produces a number of cars each year that most mainstream manufacturers lose in a rounding error. The deliberateness of that constraint is the starting point for understanding everything else about how this company works. Each car begins as a customer relationship rather than an order. The buyer does not select from a configuration menu and wait for a delivery date. They enter into a conversation that can last months about weight targets, about aerodynamic priorities, about the specific performance envelope the owner intends to explore, and the engineering decisions that will make that envelope achievable in the real world. By the time a Koenigsegg leaves the factory, it carries the fingerprints of the person who commissioned it in ways that extend far beyond a choice of paint color or interior trim. It is, in a meaningful technical sense, a singular object. There is no other one exactly like it. There never will be. What does it mean when a singular object is destroyed? It means the thing that was destroyed cannot be recovered, not restored, not replaced with a comparable unit from existing inventory. The specific machine, with its specific carbon fiber weave, its specific power delivery mapping, its specific history of decisions made in collaboration between engineer and owner across months of conversation, is gone in a way that has no clean analogy in the conventional automotive world. What burns in a Koenigsegg fire is not just material value. It is irreplaceable specificity. It is the physical record of a collaboration that cannot be reconstructed from a parts list or replicated from memory. The cars Koenigsegg builds are not assembled from a catalog of available components. Many of the parts in each machine are designed and manufactured in Ängelholm. Because no supplier produces what the engineering requires, substituting an available part for the correct part is not something the philosophy permits. This level of vertical integration in a factory of this size is, by most conventional measures, irrational. By the measure of what the cars actually do, the records they hold, the performance they deliver, the engineering problems they solve that larger organizations have declared unsolvable, it is the only approach that works. The performance is the proof. The proof is built into every component the factory makes, rather than buys. The model lost in that fire represented years of development work that did not begin in a boardroom responding to market research. Koenigsegg's engineering approach has been documented extensively.
The pre-production Koenigsegg Jesko. This is a validation car that we built according to the principle of the production line and is getting very, very close.
A philosophy of questioning every assumption the broader automotive industry treats as settled, of asking why a component needs to exist in the form it has always existed in, of pursuing solutions that larger manufacturers with larger teams and larger budgets have repeatedly declared impractical. The results are machines that hold records not because marketing departments decided records would be useful, but because the engineering pursued a direction, the performance followed without compromise or apology. Understanding what was in that fire requires understanding that it was not simply a machine. It was 30 years of an argument about what a can be, expressed in carbon fiber and titanium and compressed into a package that weighed less than most sedans. There is also what the car represented to the people who built it. In a factory where the team is small enough that every person knows what every other person is working on, a finished car is not a unit of output. It is the collective result of arguments won and lost over months, of engineering meetings where the correct answer was pursued rather than the convenient one, of quality checks where the standard was what the car deserved rather than what the schedule permitted. When that car burns, the loss is felt inside the factory as well as outside it. The fire destroyed something that belonged, in a real sense, to everyone whose hands had touched it. The fire and what it took a fire in a hypercar does not announce itself with warning. These are machines built at the absolute edge of what engineering can achieve. Tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters, fuel systems operating at pressures that would destroy components in a conventional automobile, heat management strategies that work precisely because every element is exactly where it needs to be, and performing exactly as designed. When something goes wrong at that level of engineering density, the margin between a manageable event and a catastrophic one is thin. The same precision that produces the performance also concentrates the risk. There is no redundancy built in for comfort. Every gram saved in redundant systems was saved deliberately. Carbon fiber composite, the primary structural material of every Koenigsegg built, is extraordinary in almost every dimension that matters for high-performance automotive application. It is lighter than aluminum and stronger than steel in the orientations that matter. It can be engineered to flex precisely where flex serves the chassis and resist deformation precisely where rigidity is required. It is the material that makes the weight targets achievable, that makes the power-to-weight ratios real rather than theoretical, that separates what Koenigsegg builds from what conventional manufacturing can produce.
In the future will only be hybrids or pure electric cars, but there's so many people who still enjoy the kind of lightness, rawness, and sound, so we put in the world's lightest 180-degree crank.
But carbon fiber burns. And when it burns in the presence of the fuel and heat that a performance drivetrain can produce under failure conditions, it does not burn gently. It burns with a completeness that leaves very little of the original structure recognizable to the people who built it. What an owner experiences in that moment is something that no purchase price prepares a person for. The financial dimension of a $3 million loss is real, and it is not trivial, even for the individuals who commission machines at this level. But the financial dimension is the smaller part of what disappears in that fire. What disappears is the months of conversation that produced the specification. What disappears is the first delivery, the specific moment when the car was handed over and the owner understood, for the first time in physical rather than theoretical terms, what the collaboration had actually produced. What disappears is the history of a machine that existed in exactly one form. The insurance will pay. The insurance cannot restore what was actually there. The owner of a destroyed Koenigsegg faces something that the owners of more common machines do not. There is no used market to reference for fair replacement value. There is no comparable car sitting in a dealership somewhere that a settlement could fund the purchase of. The destroyed machine was the only one of its kind. What the owner is left with, in the immediate aftermath, is the memory of something that no longer exists in any physical form, and the question of what comes next. The question does not have a standard answer. No protocol exists for it. The manufacturer must decide, without precedent to consult, what the obligation actually is. That decision was about to be made in a way nobody in the industry had anticipated. The aftermath of a hypercar fire is also, inevitably, a public event in the community that pays close attention to these things. Photographs circulate. Discussions begin. The manufacturer watches this happen, knowing that the community and the industry are both watching how they respond. Every word of the silence before the response is read carefully by people who understand what is at stake in both directions. A manufacturer who moves quickly and personally signals one set of values. A manufacturer who routes the response through legal and communications infrastructure signals another. In this case, the silence before the response did not last long. What ended the silence was not a press release. What Koenigsegg did next. The conventional response in the high-performance automotive world to a destroyed customer vehicle follows a recognizable pattern. Legal teams assess liability. Communications teams prepare statements that express sympathy while carefully limiting exposure. The outcome is settled privately. The manufacturer moves forward. This is not callousness. It is the structure organizations build to protect themselves from catastrophic product failure. It is rational. It is also, in almost every case, deeply unsatisfying to everyone involved except the lawyers. And it is not what happened here. Within days of the Jesko Nür Edition fire in Greece, Koenigsegg issued a global do-not-drive order covering all Jesko models worldwide, a decision that no manufacturer makes lightly and that most would delay for weeks while legal teams debated exposure. Christian von Koenigsegg.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO and founder of Christian Koenigsegg.
Here I'm 22 years old. I had started my first company.
Did not wait for the legal debate. He made the call personally, publicly, and without hedging. Every Jesko owner on the planet received direct communication from the factory before the story had finished circulating in the media. That sequence, manufacturer moves first, manufacturer moves fast, manufacturer moves personally, is not the industry standard. It is the exception. What followed was more unexpected still. The documented response to the owner of the destroyed car was not mediated through intermediaries. The conversation was direct. The offer was not the minimum required to resolve the situation and close the file. It was the offer of someone who understood what had been lost and responded to that understanding without the buffer of process or the protection of legal procedure. The commitment to rebuild came not from a customer relations department. It came from the founder. The decision to rebuild, to treat the destroyed car as an interrupted relationship rather than a closed transaction, reflected something structural about how Koenigsegg operates. The owners of these machines have access to the manufacturer in ways that buyers of production cars from larger brands simply do not. They can call Engelholm directly. They can visit the factory. They can speak with the engineers whose specific decisions are embedded in every component of what they own. That access is not a loyalty program. It is how the company works. Because at 20 cars per year, every owner is known personally by the people who built the machine. The engineers who worked on the original Jesko Nür Edition knew what had been destroyed. They had argued over its specific solutions, tested its components, and signed off on its delivery. The offer to rebuild came from the team as much as from the founder, because an organization that builds at this level of personal investment does not accept the destruction of its work as simply the conclusion of a billing cycle. What the owner ultimately received was not a replacement. It was a second collaboration, a second conversation about what the car should be, incorporating everything Koenigsegg had learned since the original was built. Advances in materials, refinements in dynamics, engineering developments the original timeline predated. The rebuild was framed as an opportunity, not an obligation. That distinction is the entire story. Consider the real cost. The factory produces approximately 20 cars per year. Every hour redirected toward a rebuild is an hour taken from the production queue of other commissioned machines. The decision absorbed a real financial cost and a real opportunity cost freely because the philosophy that built the company left no other acceptable option. The industry noticed. The industry is still noticing. The response that shook the hypercar world. News of the response traveled the way significant things travel in the hypercar community. Quickly, and with the specific energy of something that contradicts the expectations that experience has built. The community that follows these manufacturers consists of people who have studied the engineering in depth.
If you go over here, we can see even the wheel is made of a hollow piece of carbon fiber. We have the world's first carbon fiber production wheel that we developed ourselves.
Who understand the economics of low-volume production, who have seen manufacturers respond to difficult situations before, and who carry a detailed and unsentimental memory of how those situations were handled. When something genuinely unexpected happens in this community, the recognition spreads faster than any press release could engineer. What made this response notable beyond the immediate community was the implicit comparison it drew. The hypercar market is occupied by a small number of manufacturers whose names carry the weight of decades of documented performance and design legacy. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bugatti, McLaren, Pagani. Each has faced moments where customer vehicles were destroyed, and each has navigated those moments through the combination of insurance processes, legal frameworks, and communications management that the corporate structure of an established manufacturer produces. The results have been variable. Some owners have felt genuinely supported. Others have felt that the process served the manufacturer's interests more thoroughly than it served theirs. Koenigsegg's response created a reference point the community did not previously have, and the comparison it invited was not comfortable for every name it touched. There is a commercial dimension to this story that deserves acknowledgement without cynicism. A manufacturer whose customers trust them implicitly, whose owners feel that the relationship with the factory is genuine rather than transactional, produces a loyalty that no marketing budget can replicate. The customers of a company that behaves this way do not simply purchase the next model. They become advocates. They tell the story. The story of the fire and the rebuild has been told in enthusiast communities across the world not because the company promoted it, but because the people who witnessed it felt compelled to describe it accurately. The best public relations Koenigsegg has ever received came from a fire they could not control and a response they chose to make. The story reached beyond the enthusiast community because it touched something genuinely universal. The experience of a commitment being honored after the object at its center has been destroyed. Most people will never commission a Koenigsegg. Most people have no frame of reference for the specific engineering decisions that go into building one. But most people understand what it means to have a promise kept when keeping it costs something real. That understanding requires no technical background. It requires only the recognition that someone chose to do more than was required, without being asked and without an audience demanding it. That recognition translated across every community the story reached. The lasting effect on the industry is harder to measure than the immediate coverage, but more significant over time. It raised, explicitly and by example, the question of what the relationship between a hypercar manufacturer and its customers actually is, and what it should be. Is it a transaction that concludes at delivery, or is it something more durable, an ongoing connection that survives not just the delivery, but the years and the incidents, and the losses that follow? Koenigsegg answered the question with action rather than with statements. The industry has been living with the implications of that answer ever since, and the question it raised has not gone away. What Koenigsegg really builds? Christian von Koenigsegg founded his company in 1994 with a goal his advisors considered somewhere between ambitious and delusional: to build the world's best supercar in Sweden with a team that had never done it before inside a converted military airbase in Ängelholm where Swedish fighter jets once parked. He was 22 years old. He had no factory, no investors, and no prototype.
Koenigsegg is now, 22, 23 years in existence. We've been building cars for the last 15, 16 years to customers.
What he had was a conviction that a car built from first principles, without inheriting the assumptions of existing manufacturers, could be something the industry had not yet produced. The first Koenigsegg CC rolled out of that airbase in 1996. It was rough. It was hand-built. It was also faster than anything Sweden had ever produced. By 2004, the Koenigsegg CCR held the Guinness World Record for production car top speed, 387 kilometers per hour, breaking a record Ferrari had held for years. The record did not arrive through a marketing campaign. It arrived because the engineering pointed in that direction, and Christian von Koenigsegg followed it without compromise. What the machines have done since then is a documented sequence of records that larger manufacturers with budgets in the billions have not matched. The Agera RS set 5 world records in a single day on a closed Nevada highway in 2017, including a two-way average speed of 447 kilometers per hour that stood as the fastest production car ever recorded at that time. These were not track runs on prepared surfaces. They were public road tests, filmed, verified, and submitted to official record bodies. The proof was built into the machines. It always has been. The factory in Ängelholm has had opportunities to scale, to move production to a larger facility, to expand beyond the point where the founder can personally oversee each engineering decision. These opportunities have been evaluated and declined, deliberately. Koenigsegg produces approximately 20 cars per year. Ferrari produces approximately 14,000. That gap is not a failure of ambition. It is the condition under which the quality is possible. Every car that leaves Ängelholm has been touched, in a meaningful technical sense, by the person whose name it carries. That is a design decision applied to the company itself. And it is the reason a burned car in Greece produced a response that no larger manufacturer would have been structurally capable of giving. 30 years of consistent decisions does not happen by accident. Christian von Koenigsegg has been asked in countless documented interviews about the philosophy behind the company.
Christian Koenigsegg.
Here I'm 22 years old. I had started my first company when I was 19. It was a trading company.
The refusal to scale, the direct owner relationships, the personal accountability that extends beyond delivery. The answers have not changed across 3 decades because the belief has not changed. The fire in Greece was the most expensive test of that consistency in the company's history. The global do not drive order was issued within days. The personal commitment to rebuild the destroyed car came directly from the founder, not from a legal team, not from a communication strategy, from the same person who has been answering the same questions the same way since 1994. The fire burned a $3 million car to the ground. What it could not burn was the relationship between the man who built it and the person who owned it. That relationship survived because it was built on something more durable than carbon fiber, on a belief consistent across 30 years and now tested at its most extreme point, that what Koenigsegg makes is not a product, it is a promise. And promises, in Ängelholm, are not voided by fire. A fire that should have ended a story instead defined one. The car burned. The relationship did not. Christian von Koenigsegg rebuilt what was lost, not because contracts demanded it, not because cameras were watching, but because 30 years of decisions had already made the answer inevitable. The factory in Ängelholm does not build products. It builds promises. And the fire proved that those promises hold even when everything else turns to ash. That is the Koenigsegg difference. And no competitor has come close to replicating it. Hit-like. This story took everything to build, and it belongs in front of every hypercar fan who has never heard it told in full. Comment below. Which manufacturer do you think comes closest to this standard and why? Subscribe. The Bugatti rivalry is next.